welcome to Mountain Sleder Garage. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a fairly new product, the Trail Tech Voyager Pro. Now, this originally was made for ATVs, side-by-sides, and motorcycles. And I got interested into this because when the Polaris came out with the 7S gauge on the 2022 sleds, I found out that actually Polaris bought this company Trail Tech a couple of years ago, integrated all the software and the Trail Tech technology into their gauges on their side-by-sides, and that has transferred over to the Trail Tech gauge and the 7S gauge are pretty much the same thing. And so the cool thing about the Trail Tech and the 7S gauge is you can buddy track people, meaning you can download up to 20 people into your system, into your own group of riders, and you can track those people either on your 7S Polaris gauge or on this Trail Tech gauge. And so I really like this gauge. It's got a lot of really cool features. And if you don't want to spend the money on the 7S gauge or the new gauge that comes on the new skidoo, which is incredibly pricey, almost double what one of these costs, it's really a great option. Plus, you can track all of your buddies. If all of you have one of these or some of you have a new Polaris, you can install this on an Arctic Cat, a Polaris, a Yamaha, or a skidoo. It doesn't matter. Any of those machines they'll work on, and you can connect it with other people in your group. So it's really a cool product and a really good way to help you keep track of your temperature, your RPMs, your speed, and also your buddies like we talked about. It also plays music and a couple other things. So we're going to go through all the features on this kind of quickly. We're not going to delve into them really in depth. You're going to have to, if you buy one, just read the owner's manual. You can kind of set up the way you want. But I'm going to go through some of the features. Now, if you're watching this video for like skidoo and you want to put it on Arctic Cat, I'm going to make a video for each brand, Arctic Cat, skidoo, and Polaris, because the install is going to be a little different on each. So if you're watching this on a skidoo, but you want to know how to do it on an Arctic Cat, look for the Arctic Cat Trail Tech video and or this Polaris Trail Tech install video. We'll have one for each one. So anyway, let's look at the gauge a little bit, some of the cool features on it. If we look at this gauge, this is the gauge itself right here. It has a little SD card, micro SD port right here with a little rubber cap on it, so you're not going to get water or anything in it. That allows you a couple things. You can download music. You can download ride apps from other people and download them in your computer so you can follow someone else's ride. You can store your ride and download it to your computer. So a lot of cool things you can do with the SD card and the storage. We already talked about the buddy tracking on this. It's really a cool feature. I've only used it a little bit. And one of the coolest things on this is not only can you track the other people on your GPS map, but you can also, if one of those guys has a problem or something, they get separated from you, they're going to go exploring. There's a button on here you can push your buddy signal, and it will show up your location on everyone else's GPS, and it flashes a red spot. So you kind of know where they are, so you kind of know they're in trouble, and you can go find them. So that's really a cool feature. Now, you can only track this. It's kind of like your little BCA radios. This only tracks line of sight, maybe up to 4 miles, or over ridges and ravines, maybe 1.5 to 1/2 mile. So it kind of depends on the kind of terrain you're in, with how well that buddy tracking system is going to work. You can have a lot of parameters set up on this gauge, whether it's speed, temperature, RPM, anything. Any of those parameters you have, you can set up the warning light on it. So if, say, you want your red line on your RPM to be 8,200, you can set up the 8,200 red line and it will start to flash a warning light. There's warning lights for everything else like speed and temperature and all the other things you can download on this gauge. So that's another great feature on this gauge, is the warning light feature. This gauge also has its own internal battery. That internal battery is supposed to last for up to an hour. So if you're sitting at lunch, you want to pull this off your sled and look at where you've been, where your ride has been, where you want to go, you can pull this gauge off. It easily unsnaps from the housing. It's got a little button on top of the install housing here. It just clips on like that. If you want to take it off for your ride, you pull it off like that, and you can turn it on, and with the internal battery and just kind of look and see. Or if you want to still play music while your sled's stopped, while you're sitting, charges from your snowmobile, you're going to hook this up to power on your snowmobile when you install it. Now, there's a number of different sensors you can hook up on this and display on the screen. And when you get the mounting dock, you're going to have all these wires come off, plus there's a couple extra plugs in the back here you can plug stuff into. There's a power cord, there's a cord for speed, there's a cord for temperature, and a couple of different cords, so you can plug a number of different things in there. Speed on the gauge is preset to run on GPS. That's great if you're on a motorcycle or a side-by-side, or you're trail riding on a sled. But on a mountainside, you really want to know 2 speeds. You want to know your ground speed, how fast your snowmobile is moving across the snow. That's what GPS is going to tell you. But the thing that's really important, especially when you're tuning your sled, is track speed. Because your track speed and your ground speed can be vastly different. If you're in 2 feet of powder, you can have a 40 or 50 mile an hour track speed, but your ground speed might only be 10 miles an hour. So you really want to be able to have track speed on this. There's some wheel sensors that you can buy for motorcycles and ATVs to do actual drive shaft speed on this. I'm going to have another video for the drive shaft sensor install, so look for that. I haven't got my drive shaft speed sensors yet, so that's what's going to tell us our track speed. But for now, I'm just going to have to go off the GPS ground speed, because that's what this comes preset to, is the ground speed with GPS. There's a couple different antennas for this. There's a separate antenna for your buddy tracking, so you can keep track of your buddies. And then there's actually an internal GPS antenna. If you want better GPS antennas, like if you're putting this in a side-by-side and it's more inside of your roll cage where you have a cover on, the GPS signal's not going to be as great, so you can buy an external antenna. There's a couple of different external GPS antennas you can buy for this, which will really help your GPS signal. And so those just plug into the back of this back here and a couple of different auxiliary plugs. So really cool product. And we're going to go up to the TV now. We're going to go through some of the screens on the dash that this is going to have and kind of show you what each screen looks like and what they can display. Now, there's a number of different screens you can toggle through on the Voyager Pro. This is one screen you'll probably use quite a bit. It's called your cluster screen. This is going to have all your readings from all your sensors on it. You can have voltage, you can have your trip, mileage, RPM, temperature, your speed. It can monitor up to 6 different parameters, and the more you put on here, the smaller it gets. So if you only have 2, you're going to have 2 big numbers. If you have 6 like it's on here, you're going to have 1 big number and then 4 or 5 small ones. This is a really cool screen you'll probably use quite a bit while you're riding your snowmobile. Next screen, this is probably the screen everyone really loves and think is really cool because of the color display on it. This is similar to the last screen we showed. This is the tack bar screen. You can set your tachometer from 0 up to whatever you want it to tack out RPM, but you can adjust that. You can adjust the alarm on it, so when it alarms, when it hits like 8,200 for whatever snowmobile you have. You can actually add some other parameters like speed and temperature, some other stuff. So that and the other screen are probably the 2 screens you're going to use quite a bit, or probably the most while you're riding your snowmobile. Now this is one of the other screens I use quite a bit. It's my GPS mapping screen. Since it hasn't snowed in Utah literally in 6 weeks, we're spending a lot of time out exploring some of the places where we normally ride so we can find some new areas to ride. We found some really cool new areas. And it's really great to have a GPS map when you can do that. Start, stop points, waypoints, everything else. Your whole ride in to wherever you're going, to wherever you're going back, how long it is, elevation, and all kinds of really cool stuff you can map on this screen. This is also the screen you're going to see your buddies on. And when you do your buddy mapping, is a screen like this. It'll show their locations on here. So another really cool screen. You can, if you have a ride you really like, you want to download it, look at it on your computer when you get home, you can download this onto the SD card, move it over. Or if you want to share your ride with a buddy, you can download it onto your SD card, give it to them if they want to go out and follow the same ride as you. All right, so this is the Bluetooth, the media screen. You can play music through here. You can download music onto the SD card, play it, Bluetooth headphones into your helmet if you want to do that. You can Bluetooth this into your phone, play music off your phone. So a lot of really cool features in the media screen section that you can use. Okay, these last few screens, probably not stuff you're going to use very much. Stopwatch screen, probably not something I will hardly ever use, unless you're a racer, you're out practicing for rimshot or something, you want to see your times from the top, bottom of the hill to the top of the hill, or you're doing some other tuning or testing. Probably not going to use this very much, but it's really awesome that it has it, and it's really accessible. There's a lot of different features on this screen to do your stopwatch and your times with. Okay, this is your satellite screen. Another screen that I probably don't use very much, especially on the snowmobile, because you have such direct visualization with satellites when you're out. But you can look at this screen, you can see what satellites are above you, how many are above you, what you're being tracked by. Kind of a cool little screen if you're really into kind of techie stuff, but I really haven't opened it up and looked at it, but it is there if that's something you kind of think is cool and want to look at. And then the last screen is the setup screen, the menu, where you can go in, you can change your units, your vehicle profile, there's different displays, you can change different screens, the user manuals in there, you can change Bluetooth settings, a lot of different things you can do in the settings menu that are really cool to set up and personalize your Trail Tech Pro gauge. Now there's a number of different mounting systems you can use to mount the Voyager Pro to your snowmobile. This actually came with mine, these little handlebar mounts. It actually just hooks to the back of your mounting plate here. I don't really like this, and I'll show you why we mount this on the snowmobile. That's the easiest one, the simplest one that comes actually with your system if you don't want to buy another one. This is the Trail Tech mount that I went with. This is designed to actually mount this to a roll bar like in your side-by-side. It comes with this bracket here that's got this curved surface here that fits around, and then you use a worm clamp to clamp it to it. This actually works really good for clamping it to your handlebar post or some other place. And this is the one I'm going to probably use to mount it to my snowmobiles with. Now this is the other mount you might want to consider. If you want to mount this onto a flat surface like your dash, you can mount the 4 screw holes here onto the flat surface right in front of your handlebars on your Polaris or your skidoo snowmobile, and you can mount it there. So we have our Voyager Pro mounted on our skidoo handlebar now with the handlebar mount. Let's go in here. You can see the handlebar mounts mounted on the back side there, wrapped around the handlebar, and you can put this on the right side or the left side of the handlebars. And again, not in a great spot. I really don't like the handlebar mounting location. I mean, it's a little bit better here than it is where you mount on the Polaris, but still, it's going to be kind of in your way a little bit if you're moving from side to side on your snowmobile. It's in a decent place to be able to see it, but this is not my favorite spot to mount it here using the handlebar mount. Now we're going to install the ROPS mount on our skidoo, on our handlebar riser. So what we're going to do, put the worm clamp through this middle hole here on your handlebar riser. The curved surface on here kind of really meshes nicely with the curved surface on your stock handlebar riser on your skidoo. Now when we feed this back around, this end of the worm clamp is going to go through this small end of the mount, and the big end is going to be here where we're going to tighten it down at. So we're going to feed that through. All right, now we've got our worm clamp tightened around our mount here. We're going to put our other little mount on. And we'll put our gauge on. So, have it mounted. We can put it in a number of different positions, kind of where you can see it. If you want to roll your sled over, you want this out of the way, you can kind of bend it down like that so it's not going to get ripped off. Or if you're going to roll your sled, you just want to remove your gauge, you just push the button, take that off. Now, if we stand up here on our snowmobile, our gauge is in a pretty decent spot for being able to see it. Real nice bright display. I mean, this gauge is really probably in the worst place you could put a gauge. It's almost worthless to put it there because it's almost always going to be covered with snow. Here's a little bit better. It's closer to you. It's easier to wipe that off if you need to wipe it off if it's got snow on it. But actually a pretty good spot to mount this on the skidoo is right there on the handlebar mount. Now, the other place you can mount this on your skidoo, if you don't want it attached to your handlebars, if you have mount with a flat surface here, I've taken off my roll bar mount, and I just have this flat surface. You can mount this directly to the flat surface of your gauge right here on the plastic with either of those mounts. So if we come in for a closer look on our skidoo, if you want to mount this right there, you're going to have to drill 2 holes with that, put a nut and a screw through it so it's stationary there. With this mount or the 4-hole, this gauge, it sits about right there. Really a pretty nice spot for it if you don't want it on your handlebars. Now, I'm going to show you how you hook up the inputs that go to your Trail Tech gauge. There's 4 hookups. There's power that goes to your Trail Tech. There's temperature for your temperature gauge. There's a tack pickup, and then there's a wheel speed pickup. I'm going to eventually hook that up and do a drive shaft monitor speed on that, because I really want to be able to monitor track speed on this. So the first thing we hook up is the tachometer pickup. I have that wrapped around there about 5 times, which is the recommended number of wraps to start with. You can increase and decrease the wraps depending on how sensitive you want this pickup to be. So that's your tach sensor pickup. The next thing we're going to show you is the temperature sensor pickup. I didn't use this inline temperature sensor. I really didn't want to cut open my coolant line in order to install this. I use the one that's used for a cylinder head where your spark plug's supposed to go there for an air-cooled machine. And I just unscrewed my stock temperature sensor in my cylinder head, screwed it back on down through there. You can see down here, my stock temperature sensor's right here, and I have that copper O-ring kind of mounted underneath it. That gives you quite an accurate temperature. On my Polaris, when I did that on my Polaris, those two readings were only about 1 or 2 degrees different. So that's actually a really nice way to do it if you don't want to splice your coolant hose. So the last thing we're going to hook up is our power wire. And this is your accessory power source here on your skidoo. It unplugs off there. That's just a dummy plug. And now if you can find the female end of this, you can plug it into here and splice into that. But what I did, this gauge here, the only way to charge this is with this in the cradle with your engine running. There's no other way to charge it, which is ridiculous. They do sell a accessory wall charger, but it needs to be plugged into this little plug right here. In order to get to that plug, I have to take my whole machine apart, which is absolutely ridiculous. You would think that someone at Trail Tech would have figured out, hey, it'd be nice to be able to take this gauge off and take it in the house and plug it into a wall charger and charge it, and without having to have it on my machine. But somehow they didn't figure that out. How I got around that was I spliced into a positive and a negative wire onto my wires here. I'm just going to keep that plugged in. That wire goes to the end of this with I bought this little plug, and then my power source to my Trail Tech comes to this plug. Now I'm going to put this plug, it's going to go wire over here and go into my dash bag on my hood. That way I can get easy access to this, and I can unplug this when I want to. I can plug my AC source into there, charge this without having to pull all this apart. So that's how I resolved to fix the non-charging port on the gauge itself. So anyway, everything's all hooked up. I'm going to button up the hood, everything else, put this thing all back together, and then we're going to go ride it, see how it works. Now we got our Trail Tech all hooked up. It's all mounted with our RAM mount. We got our plug here in our dash, so if we want to be able to charge this with our AC wall charger, we can unplug this, plug it into that plug, and we can do that. We got our tack hooked up, our engine temperature hooked up. There's one other thing that I have to show you that I didn't mention when we were hooking up our inputs. I attached my buddy system antenna right here. That's this thing with the little cross. It's got 2 little flexible antennas that come out. Got this wire that comes and plugs into the back of this. That's for the buddy system. This has a different antenna for GPS that's built into it. So we got this thing all hooked up, and it's time to go ride this. I really love this gauge here. I'm going to start it up. It takes just a second for it to power up once you turn it on, but really nice gauge. It shows that I'm charging right there. I got a little charging thing next to it. Now it's in a pretty nice spot. I really like where we ended up putting it. This will be a really nice feature, I think, when we get the buddy tracking hooked up to it. It'll really help us when we're out on the mountain, especially with where we like to ride the trees and stuff, because we get separated a little bit. We're going to go spend the next couple of days riding this with the Trail Tech all hooked up, and we'll see how we like it. So we'll see you next time. All right, so we had our 3 skidoos out today. All 3 of them set up with the Trail Tech system. Had this one on the bars, this one down here a little lower, this one on the bars. I gotta tell you, it was phenomenal having the buddy tracking system. I mean, it was way better than I think any of us were even expecting, because you could, as you see in one of the videos I'll post on here with this, as you're riding, we're in 2 feet of powder coming up over the hood, and everyone's kind of thinks that this is going to get covered in snow. I don't think one time during the day I had to reach down and uncover the snow off this, because it kind of comes up over the hood and blows through here, and it doesn't even blow on top of the Trail Tech, which was really amazing. But we would get separated, one of us, and just being able to look down on your gauge. I mean, you could actually follow the gauge while you're riding and find your buddy with the buddy tracking turned on. It really was pretty phenomenal. I think way better than any of us were expecting. So if you want buddy tracking, for sure, it was really a phenomenal little feature on the Trail Tech Voyager Pro. So it's a great product. It's really fun having it on our snowmobiles. It just, I mean, someone was stuck, you found them within a couple of minutes. It was just so easy. So great product, highly recommend it, and we'll see you next time at Mountain Sled Garage.